Ethan and Laura had been hiking through the sprawling Darkwood Forest for hours. They had set out early in the morning, their backpacks filled with supplies, their spirits high. The forest was known for its beauty and its challenging trails, and they were eager to explore every inch of it. The sun was shining brightly, casting dappled light through the canopy of leaves above, and the air was filled with the sounds of birds singing and leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. The trail had been easy to follow, and they were confident in their navigation skills. They had a map, a compass, and a GPS device, and they had studied the route carefully before setting out. They chatted and laughed as they walked, enjoying the fresh air and the sense of adventure. The forest was alive with the sounds of nature, and they felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. But as dusk fell, the woods began to change. The light began to fade, and the shadows grew longer and darker. The cheerful sounds of birds and insects were replaced by an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves or snap of a twig. The temperature dropped, and a chill settled over the forest. Ethan and Laura exchanged uneasy glances, their earlier confidence beginning to waver. The trees seemed to close in, their branches tangled and twisted like they were alive. The once clear path became overgrown and difficult to follow, and the forest seemed to take on a life of its own. The gnarled branches reached out like skeletal hands, and the underbrush grew thick and tangled, making it hard to see where they were going. The sense of unease grew stronger, and they began to feel as if they were being watched. The air grew thick, almost suffocating, with the smell of damp earth and rotting wood. The ground was soft and spongy underfoot, and the fog began to roll in, adding to the sense of disorientation. The once familiar forest had become a maze of shadows and darkness, and they could no longer see the way forward. "We should turn back," Laura suggested, her voice trembling. Ethan nodded, but when they turned to retrace their steps, the path was gone. It was as if the forest had swallowed it whole, leaving them standing in the middle of a labyrinth of trees. Panic began to set in as they realized they were lost. They tried to stay calm, but the sense of dread was overwhelming. The forest seemed to close in around them, and every direction looked the same. They called out for help, but their voices were swallowed by the dense foliage and the oppressive silence. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows through the forest. The darkness seemed to come alive, and the trees took on sinister shapes. The once beautiful forest had become a place of nightmares, and they felt a growing sense of fear and helplessness. They knew they had to find a way out, but every step seemed to take them deeper into the heart of the darkness. The air grew colder, and with it came an unsettling sound. At first it was faint, just a soft rustling in the underbrush. They stopped and listened, their hearts pounding in their chests. The sound grew louder, and they realized it was coming closer. They strained their eyes, trying to see through the darkness, but all they could see were shadows and shapes that seemed to move and shift. But soon it became clear that something was moving through the woods, something big. The rustling turned into the sound of heavy footsteps, and they could hear the crunch of leaves and the snap of twigs underfoot. The sense of dread grew stronger, and they felt as if they were being hunted. They looked at each other, their eyes wide with fear, and knew they had to keep moving. The sound of heavy footsteps echoed through the trees, accompanied by low, rumbling growls. The growls were deep and menacing, and they seemed to come from all around them. The forest was alive with the sounds of the creature, and they felt as if they were being surrounded. The sense of fear was overwhelming, and they knew they had to find a way out before it was too late. Ethan and Laura froze, their hearts pounding in their chests. The growling grew louder, closer, and soon they could hear the sound of breathing, heavy, labored breaths, like a predator stalking its prey. They could feel the creature's presence, and it was as if the darkness itself was closing in around them. They knew they had to run, but their legs felt like lead, and the fear was paralyzing. The air was thick with the smell of decay, and a sense of dread washed over them. They could feel the creature's eyes on them, and it was as if the forest itself was alive with malevolent intent. They knew they had to move, but every step was a struggle. The ground was uneven and treacherous, and the darkness seemed to close in around them. They could hear the creature getting closer, and they knew they had to run. They ran, their feet pounding against the forest floor, the sound of the creature chasing them growing louder with every step. The trees seemed to twist and shift, guiding them deeper into the woods, and no matter how fast they ran, they couldn't escape the feeling of being watched. The forest was a maze of shadows and darkness, and every direction seemed to lead them deeper into the heart of the nightmare. They could hear the creature's footsteps behind them, and the sense of fear was overwhelming. They knew they had to keep moving, but their legs were growing tired, and the darkness was closing in. Just when they thought they couldn't run anymore, they burst out of the trees and into a clearing. They collapsed to the ground, gasping for air, the woods behind them eerily silent once more. The clearing was a small oasis of light in the darkness, and they felt a sense of relief wash over them. They had escaped, but the memory of that night would haunt them forever. They looked at each other, their faces pale and their eyes wide with fear, and knew they would never forget the terror they had experienced. They had escaped, but the memory of that night would haunt them forever. The forest had taken on a life of its own, and they knew they had been lucky to escape with their lives. They would never forget the sense of dread and fear that had washed over them, and they knew they would never venture into the Darkwood Forest again. The experience had changed them, and they would always carry the memory of that night with them. Have you ever found yourself hopelessly lost in the woods? Beware. Stay vigilant, because there are terrifying creatures in the woods that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. The forest is a place of beauty and wonder, but it is also a place of danger and darkness. If you ever find yourself lost in the woods, remember to stay calm and keep moving. The forest can be a place of nightmares, but it can also be a place of adventure and discovery. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Beware, stay vigilant, because there are terrifying creatures in the woods that few have ever seen and lived to talk about. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe and follow us for more. Join us on TikTok and YouTube for more bone-chilling chronicles. If you dare,